Think about it. Think about it.
And welcome to High School Basketball Weekly. Tim Moore alongside of Rick Bua. And Rick, the high school basketball season is in full swing, and we've got a tremendous amount to cover this week, and we're going to get right into it, starting off with the boys' action. And believe it or not, with all the high school actions kicking into high gear during this new year, the McCann Tech Hornets, they've been off for almost 2 weeks, Rick.
Yeah, it's going to be 2 weeks. On last week's program, Tim, we told our viewers that there was a storm a week or two ago here that set back a couple of games, and we didn't have very much to report last week, and we did okay, but it was a lot less than we normally report. And for the McCann Tech Hornets and poor coach Chris Bullitt, he hasn't played since, I think it might have been the 22nd or 23rd of December. So they're off until this coming Friday, January 6th. It'll be tomorrow night when this broadcast will come on the air. And then they don't play Ludlow until Monday the 9th. So they're standing at 3-2 overall, 1-2 in the league. I'd stated on the show, Tim, earlier this season, boy, when you can't play, you get very antsy because you can't practice. Practice is great. Coach needs to practice. Every coach needs his team to practice, but you need that competition too. And you can't find teams to scrimmage right now because they're in full swing. So we'll have to see what the layoff's going to look like for the McCann Tech boys, but we'll have plenty to cover on next week's program for them.
And a team, Rick, that I consider the biggest enigma of the year so far, the Mount Greylock Mounties, who are undefeated in their league and had a nice victory over Smith Academy, but then came up on the short end of the game with Mount Everett, and you'd have to consider that an upset by any.
Yeah, I absolutely do, Tim, and we'll call it the way it is. And we love these four teams that we cover on this program, and we love Coach Thistle and his kids, and we're still pretty high that they're going to turn things around. They're very senior oriented. They're not getting the balanced scoring. They're getting scoring from their backcourt right now, where earlier in the season, when we first saw them, their opener was up at Drury, the game that you and I did. And we thought they had the game in the bag and then lost it in overtime to the Blue Devils. And their bigs were really, really hot that night. Seamus Barnes and Jackson Chelsea had great games, which was a little atypical than last year where the backcourt led the way. The kids that were juniors last year, and everybody I've named so far are seniors this year, we thought this was going to be their season. This was going to be the year that Coach Thistle's kids would not just do well in their league and maybe run the table again. It's hard to sit here early in the season and say they're going to go 10-0 like they did last year, but we thought that they had an outside shot. Well, they're still 2-0 in the league, but they're 2-4 overall, and the second victory in their league was 58-49. I'm sorry, over Smith Academy. Adam Sandiford led the way with 14. Elias Robinson had 10, and Chase Doyle had 9. So that's their backcourt. So again, nothing there from the bigs really in scoring. And then they lost to a very, very good. I can't tell you how good this team is. The Monument Mountain Spartans. They lost down in Great Barrington, 81-52. Chase Doyle and Max McAllister again leading the way with 14 and 11 respectively. And then you're right, Tim. They did get upset by Mount Everett, 68-57. Chase Doyle had 19, so he had a big game. Adam Sandiford had 13. So there's the backcourt again, but you're not getting your bigs in scoring. And Coach Thistle always plays his best ball and gets positive results when he gets balanced scoring from his front court and his backcourt as well.
Yeah, and young man also, I'm noticing of late, Rick, he had a tough time when we covered the game up at Drury, but you could see he's got the ability to score. Adam Sandiford. And I talked to Coach Hadley, who actually filled in for Coach Thistle up at Drury, and asked him about Sandiford. He said, the kid's got a lot of potential. They're working with him, and they're doing something right because he's starting to come on. And with that squad, Rick, you know what you're going to get with a Chase Doyle. Chase is a solid basketball player.
Leading scorer last year, yeah.
Right, and if you get a little bit of help up front and Sandiford comes on, again, I like this team in Division 5, and I think they're going to make some noise in the state tournament when they get there. Their issue, obviously, is with their strength of schedule is winning enough games and moving on up the rankings so that they get a decent seed in that tournament.
Yeah, they're going to be fine in their league. They're either going to go 1 or 2 in their league. They will qualify for anything done in Western Mass and in the D5 states, I'm sure. But that was a big setback last night. And take nothing away from the Eagles of Mount Everett. The boys have a really, really good team this year. They're 5-2 overall, even though they're 1-2 in the league. But they play very well at home down in Sheffield, and they just ran into a hot Mount Everett team. So they're going to have to turn things around, and they hopefully will when they take on Mohawk tonight.
Well, Hoosick Valley, Rick, they had a really, really nice victory down at East Hampton. Tough place to play. And in their league, Rick, we talked about this before the start of the show. Anytime in the league that Hoosick Valley plays in, you can beat a team on the road. That's a real feather in your cap, and Hoosick Valley edged East Hampton 53-51.
This is a very, very tough league that they're in. I think it's the Hampshire North, or it's Hampshire North or South. It's the one opposite where the Blue Devils are in. But that is a very, very tough league. And Bay State's in there, even though they're down a little bit this year. Bay State's in there, Wacona, Monument Mountain, East Hampton, South Hadley, all tough teams. It's one of those leagues that when they're somewhat balanced, you would see a home and home win, or maybe lose a home win on the road, or vice versa.
Right.
And teams with not a subpar 500 season, but kind of hanging around there just because they're knocking each other off, and we'll have to see if that happens or not. But that's a real tough league, and that was a great performance. Big win for Bill Robinson's Hurricanes down at East Hampton, and so at least now they know that the next time they get them, they'll get them in Cheshire. No surprise, Frank Field with a double-double, 17 points and 15 rebounds, leading the way for the Hurricanes. Joey McGovern, the sharpshooting junior guard, added 12. They were tied at 27 at the half, but then the Hurricanes went on a big run and outscored East Hampton 19-9 in the third quarter, and then hung on at the end. East Hampton did the same thing to the Hurricanes in the fourth quarter, but they hung on, and that's a big win on the road.
And I think the story also of that game, Rick, was the fact that Hoosick Valley drained 10 3-pointers.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. That's that'll keep any. Yeah, and I don't care if they shot 30%. If they nail 10, there's 30 points right there.
Right, so and that brings the shooting percentage up when you could hit that many 3-pointers. And speaking of Hoosick Valley, Rick, we're going to be up at Hoosick Valley. The game of the week coming up is Hoosick Valley taking on the Tigers of South Hadley. That's always an entertaining high school basketball game. That's Monday, January 9th. We're going to be covering that game tape delay, so you want to check out on channel 1302 for a future tape delayed broadcast of that. We'll be there broadcasting it Monday, but if you have time, you might want to swing up to see South Hadley Tigers take on the Hoosick Valley Hurricanes, and again, another difficult game in that league for sure. Drury Blue Devils keep rolling along, Rick, and in fact, you covered a game with John Bird up at Drury High School against a very tough Greenfield Green Wave team, and it was quite a ball game.
Yeah, Greenfield was handled by the Blue Devils pretty easy last year, but then again, that was last year. And so I've seen some definite improvement with the Green Wave squad. They're very scrappy. They pass the ball really, really well. They play great defense, and they have 2 incredible guards. And their point guard is one of the best ball handlers I've seen in a long, long time. And they have a shooter, and they screened for the shooter, and he was really hot. And Greenfield just wouldn't go away. It was a tough win. Drury had a 7 to 10 point lead most of the game, but Greenfield just wouldn't go away. And trailing 70 to 63, their 3-point shooter hit one at the buzzer to make the score look a little bit closer. But it was a good game. But for the Blue Devils, I was super impressed, and I've been waiting for this young man to come out and give us a performance to show his skills off. And that senior forward, Ahmad David, he led the Blue Devils team with 26 points, and he went to the line 11 times and knocked down all 11 shots.
Right.
He had an incredible game. Louis Gelati, you would expect nothing from the incredible, sensational senior. He added 21, but he was 9 of 12 from the free throw line.
Right.
So that's where Drury won that ball game. They had a 13-point lead at the half, 40-27, but got outscored 39-30 by the Green Wave in the second half, and they just would not go away. So, kudos to the Green Wave. They are a much improved team in that league. That also includes Pioneer Valley, Frontier,
right.
Hopkins Academy. Mahar, I think Drury's going to do okay. Right now they stand at 5-1, 3-0 in the league, but their toughest competition is coming their way in the league, and a lot of it's on the road.
And a big moment in that game, Rick, Louis Gelati scoring his 1,000th point.
And that was a couple days after he did.
Right.
Yeah.
He's such an outstanding young man. He got the 1,000th point with the Blue Devils defeating Lennox.
Yeah, he scored a team high 28 points, 17 in the second half, and late in the game against Lennox. And Lennox gave them a battle. They were trailing at halftime by 6 or 8 points to the Millionaires, and came back in the second half and played really, really great Drury boys basketball. And late in the fourth quarter, on his second free throw, he drained it for his 1,000th point. The thing about Louis Gelati is, he got some playing time as a freshman and scored a couple hundred points. And then junior year, they only played 12 games, Tim, and that was the COVID season,
right,
where they had to play with the masks and we couldn't get into the games. So he lost 8 to 10 games that season, came back scoring 500 last year, and then is playing incredible basketball, and typically is Drury's leading scorer. Everything pretty much goes around him. But also in that game, Amant David scored 18 points and had 15 rebounds. Sammy Mormon had 10. So this week,
he's the man this week, Rick, and well deserved. Amant David with 2 huge games for the Blue Devils.
Yeah, like I said, 26 points against Greenfield, perfect from the free throw line, a bunch of rebounds, block shots, great defense, 18 points, 15 rebounds against Lennox. And Tim, in what stratosphere does Frank Field have the week he had and Louis Gelati have the week he had and not be our player of the week?
I know.
But we had to give it to Amant David. The other kids are phenoms, the leaders of their team. You're going to hear about Louis Gelati and Frank Field right through March with us. And Amant David, take nothing away from him, came on really, really strong last year, became Coach Rissett's first man off the bench, and played 2 great games last week and 2 big wins for the Blue Devils.
And, Rick, well, we got a moment here. I know we focus a lot on Northern Berkshire teams, but we have a moment here on the boys' side. I'd just like to talk a little bit about 4 other teams, the 2 teams in Pittsfield, Taconic and Pittsfield, who are having outstanding years. And, of course, Monument Mountain, who's undefeated. We talked about them, and they are quite a team in and of themselves. And Wacona is 4-1 now. They've got their game going well. And so those 4 teams,
yeah, absolutely.
Rick, if you get a chance to see them play, I know Drury will play Wacona once this year, and if they've played Monument, and they played them once already, but those 4 teams are playing outstanding high school basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as Wacona is concerned, Coach Belcher has a very talented team. Their only loss was at Monument Mountain. The Spartans are 5-0, 2-0 in the league. I see them staying undefeated for a bit. Yeah, I really do.
Right.
I know that's a tough thing to make a call later in the season, but early on, they're going to be clean for a while. The Pittsfield Generals have been very impressive. With their 2 losses, they're 5-2. One loss was to Taconic opening night, and one loss to Pope Francis, so no shame there. And the Braves themselves lost. Their only loss this year was to Pope Francis. They're staying at 6-1. So there's some incredibly talented boys Berkshire teams this year.
Yeah, no question about it. On the girls' side, Rick, as I talked about on the boys' side, the enigma so far of the year on the boys' side, I said was Mount Greylock. The enigma team for me this year on the girls' side are the McCann Tech Hornets. They stand at 1-5, and they've such a talented team, and they've struggled so far this year.
They have struggled, Tim, and I'm not really sure why. If I get an opportunity to see or talk to Coach Kathy Buda, I'm certainly going to get her feel on what's happening this year with her squad. But as you viewers recall, we talked a lot about Izzy Lacasse for 3 to 4 years. the outstanding guard that graduated from McCann last year, would have been a 1,000-point scorer. And when she was out last year for almost half the season, the younger kids just stepped up, and I thought that they played very, very well. They didn't win all their games. They did finish under 500, but they got the respect from their opponents on how hard they scrapped and fought. But I believe they're having a hard time putting the ball in the hoop right now. So they're not scoring a lot of points, and they're not getting anywhere near double figures from either Hannah Boisvert or Macy Tatro. So they've been held down. Although in a loss to Pope Francis, Macy Tatro did score 13, and point guard Addie Heyer had 11. They had a disappointing loss to Palmer, Tim. A very atypical score of 37-16. You don't usually see that with a coach Kathy Budai team. And their leading scorer was Emily Glacier with only 6 points. So it was almost like they must have had a cover over the hoop last night. Right. I can't tell you why, but I really thought last year these kids stepped up when their leading scorer was out, and I think that's what he's hoping will pick up at some point. They'll start falling for.
Yep. Greylock, when they were the Greylock Mountie girls, they had a light schedule beginning of the year, but they've kicked into full gear, and they've had some nice games of late for Coach John Jacoby.
Yeah, they're 2-3 overall, but 2-2 in the league, and they're the same league as the Drury girls are, and I believe it's the Central Girls League. They defeated Agawam 44-41. The sophomore Charlotte Cootie, who's been a player of the week here early this season, led the way for the Lady Mounties with 17. Molly Sullivan had 10. Then lost a close game. And this is what happens, Tim, when we report on Coach Jacoby's kids, they lose some very, very hard-fought, close games.
Yes.
They lost to Munson 56-50. Again, Charlotte Cootie led the way with 18. Molly Sullivan and Emma Newberry each had 8. And then they lost to Agawam on the road. So they split with Agawam, winning at home, losing on the road 60-50. Charlotte Cootie, a huge game, 27 points. Molly Sullivan had 13. You would think that any night that would be a recipe for a Coach Jacoby victory, but it just didn't come out that way. Looks like they might have faltered defensively a little bit in that loss, but they'll be okay. I think they'll be around 500. His teams usually are. They're usually on that uphill climb trying to get there. I think this year he's going to try to get above. He wouldn't have to work so hard at the end because most of his games later in the season feels like playoff games to him.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the way it played out last year as he was on that bubble. Right. And, he wants to win as many of these games early on as he can to avoid that scenario. So he gets himself a little bit of a cushion, and hopefully he'll be able to do that as the season goes along. But they stand, 2-2 in their league and 2-3 overall. So they've got some games. Of course, they're going to play Drury tomorrow night, January 6th, and then they come right back and play Springfield ICS.
A couple of tough games.
Yep, a couple of tough games for him. And they're, if he can steal one of them, so that would be a feather in his cap.
Yeah, absolutely.
Turning to the Drury girls, Rick, a game that we covered, and it was, I thought, an outstanding game for 3/4 of the game. The Drury Blue Devils lost to Hoosick Valley 54-42 in a game that, in fact, that game's going to be on tape delay right after this show tonight. If you stay tuned, you can see that game, and it's worth watching because it was a good one. They lost 54-42 to Hoosick Valley, but Drury has nothing to be ashamed of in that one, Rick.
No, they came out pretty strong, and we did talk to Coach Downey after the game, and he was really down, and his girls were down, but the score didn't really indicate the game was played. It was a 12-point win for the Hurricanes, but it was much closer. The Blue Devils led 12-10 after one. They were both tied at 27 at the half. And then the Blue Devils, Tim, came out, and we talked about this at the game, and then before this show, before we went on the air tonight, that don't forget the Blue Devils scored the first 6 points of the third quarter, and they really had the crowd thinking about it. They had the Drury fans up, and boy, did the momentum change. So kudos to Coach John Frederick's Hurricanes for keeping their composure, playing their game, tough-nosed defense, knocking down a few shots, and they went on a huge run, and it was that run in the third quarter that propelled them to that win.
Yeah, it was a 15-0 run. The score was tied 27 and a half, and a real barn burner in the first half. And as you said, Drury came out, and they scored the first 6 points of the second half to take a 6-point lead. And then all of a sudden, Drury went cold. Hoosick Valley picked up their defense a little bit, and they went on a 15-0 run.
They did,
and away it goes. Now, there was some foul trouble in that particular game that affected both teams. Hoosick Valley was in foul trouble in the first half. Gabby Billis sat down most of that first half.
And I think, Tim, if you know basketball and you watch a lot of basketball, no matter what level it is, when one of your stars or your leading scorers are on the bench, you have to take the opportunity to attack and to gain some points favorably while that young man or young lady are on the bench. And the Blue Devils weren't able to do that. And again, that's because of the strength of the Hurricanes bench. They played really, really well. So, you know, the Blue Devils have nothing to be ashamed about at all. It's just going into a Hoosick Valley game. Yeah, you got to go back. These kids were little kids when the Hoosick dynasty started.
Right.
And so they're gonna have to look at it we played well for a half. We even took a 6-point lead in the third quarter, and we can do this, but we have to be consistent in our 32 minutes.
Yeah, they've been in a lot of big games over the years, so it's hard to rattle the Hurricanes. They continue to play well, and but you're looking at we got some highlights of that game for you right now. Hopefully, we're going to have them. Yeah, and to start right off. Well, the Player of the Week. We'll flip to that quickly.
Here they are.
Here it is. There's right
Maddie
there
Holding,
you see
yeah.
Maddie Holding with a big three-pointer, and then it was answered by Hannah Shea. And again, Hoosick Valley got production from some big players, and there you go, Ashlyn LaSure, who had a big game. But there again, Lauren Davis made a three-pointer. This is all in the first half, followed up again by Hannah Shea, and then Haley McNeese off the bench for the Hurricanes. A big three-pointer. Brooke Bishop, as we closed out the first half, with a big putback there. And then Mary Capiello responded as well with another three-pointer. Again, all of this off the bench for the Hoosick Valley Hurricanes. And of course, Taylor Garabedian, she's a handful, very strong, powerful forward for Hoosick Valley. But again, it was a game of halves. Hoosick Valley in foul trouble in the first half. Billets had to sit down. Gabby Billets, their outstanding senior center. In the second half, Drury got into foul trouble. Jacinta Felix, their outstanding sophomore guard, she had to sit down. She got in foul trouble. And that was really the story of the game in the second half, that 15-0 run.
It was. And again, I think the difference was not being able to take advantage. Not they didn't try, but they weren't able. The Hurricanes would not let Drury pull too far ahead. And like I said, they were tied at the half. And I'm sure Coach Frederick was very pleased, not just with the fact that the Gabby Billets, who hadn't scored in the first half, the Blue Devils could not really gain much of a lead, and no lead at all by the half, even though they came out strong. But Alyssa Russell did score 15 in that game, and Lauren Davis had 11. Brooke Bishop had 9. And for the Hurricanes, they
Ashlyn LaSure had the 15.
Yeah, she had Taylor Garabedian had a big game, and Ashlyn LaSure another big game. So they had a pretty good week last week overall, even though they lost to Pittsfield, Tim.
Right.
50-43. They had a couple of nice wins. That win over South Hadley, 47-36. Was a big win, and that they had some big free throws down the stretch there in that one too.
Right.
But
yeah, that was another big win.
Yeah, no shame losing to PHS.
Right.
But the games that they really needed to win, they certainly did.
Right. And as you said, in that game against South Hadley, again they got some good play out of Garabedian and Billets, and they went 15 for 21 in the final quarter. That really was the story. As Garabedian and Ashlyn LaSure combined to make 12 of 15 free throws there down the stretch against South Hadley. So they pulled away for the victory. And again,
I think Ashlyn LaSure was definitely the unsung hero last week. That's
Yeah.
what made her player of the week this
Yeah,
week.
no question about it. Ashlyn LaSure, the sophomore. I'm just so high on this young lady, Rick. She handles the point responsibilities for the Hurricanes, and she plays outstanding defense. She had quite a matchup against Drury, against her and Lauren Davis and Jacinta Felix. They battled throughout the game. She's got a nice shot from the perimeter. She's good at the free throw line. She's a heady ball player, and she's this week's Player of the Week, Ashlyn LaSure, the sophomore from Hoosick Valley. And again, we want to remind you that if you get a chance, you can stay tuned right here on channel 1302. We're going to have the rebroadcast of the Drury versus Hoosick Valley girls game. It was really an outstanding game for us to call and for the fans to watch. They certainly got their money's worth.
It was a lot of fun
in that one.
And one of the things we didn't mention, Tim, I'd like to mention is with Ashlyn LaSure is she knocked down, I think, the biggest three of all the threes that the Hurricanes hit. I think she hit the biggest one in the fourth quarter. Kind of put the icing on the cake in that win. They kind of sealed the victory for them.
Right. Yeah. She she's won. She kept shooting the basketball. She was cold in the first half, but she stuck with it in the second half, and so her shots started to fall, and really kind of spelled the difference. So she's this week's girls high school player of the week, and also while we have a chance here, Rick, on the girls side. I want to just also give a kudos and shout out to both Pittsfield and Wacona on the girls' side. Both those teams are undefeated. Two very, very good teams. And I believe they're going to play each other, I think, on the schedule. I was looking at that. But both those teams are having outstanding seasons. I know Wacona will play Hoosick Valley again next week. Hopefully we'll be able to do that game, at least by tape delay. But those two teams are having a great year.
Yeah, Wacona is 5-0, overall 4-0 in the league, beating Putnam and Hampshire Regional last week handily, both games. They've got Hampshire coming up again in Granby, so they're on a roll right now. And their two big leaders are Olivia Gambaroni and Grace Wigington. Grace Wigington, I've noticed in the box score, Tim, is she's playing a game, not playing a game, playing two, maybe not playing one. So I think they're taking it really, really easy with her with the injury she had last year. Right. Because as we said many times, and we said before the show tonight, as far as Liz Kay's team is going to go later in the season in February and in March, she's got to be there. Grace Wigington has got to be there. And but they're doing really, really well. And Pittsfield, yeah, that was a big win for them at Hoosick Valley, 50-43. The Duquettes, Randy and Jamie led the way, and they defeated West Springfield very handily. And they've got Taconic coming up again, who they beat on opening night. So they're 5-0 in the league. And as we said earlier, about some of the boys' teams, some of the girls' teams are playing incredible ball too.
Right. Yeah. Very, very solid squads there in Pittsfield, the Generals, and Wacona. And if you get a chance to catch them locally or even down in Pittsfield, you want to see those two teams. They're very good. And of course, you want to catch up on all the action. High school basketball weekly, where every week this time, Thursday at 7:30, we rebroadcast our show Saturday morning at 10 o'clock and Sunday at 7 o'clock on channel 1302. And you also want to look on channel 1302 for the schedule of games that we are broadcasting tape delayed. We have a good schedule of games coming up, so you want to check your local listings on channel 1302 for the games as they're rebroadcast. We rebroadcast them several times. And the game we're going to be doing again, Hoosick Valley, that's our game of the week next week, the boys action. A big one in that league, South Hadley at Hoosick Valley. We'll be there for that one.
Right? They battled last year. They're going to battle this year. And you need to win those league games, and you got to protect home court, and that's what Coach Robertson's kids are going to try to do. So I'm looking forward to doing that game with you on Monday the 9th.
Yeah, we're going to be there, and it's going to be a blast, that's for sure. So once again, we want to thank you for tuning in to High School Basketball Weekly. For Rick Bull, I'm Tim Morey saying see you next week on High School Basketball Weekly.
So long, everybody.